So welcome everybody to another episode of A Case for Travel Tuesdays. I have with me today Eva Mossberg, whose passion for travel propelled her into an international exploration early on at age 19, when she waved her native country goodbye from a 44-foot sailboat and never looked back. Her life is full of rich learning experiences, such as sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, which is incredible, volunteering at the first ever conference on ecotourism, crossing the Andes on horseback and living in the West Indies, Portugal, and since 1994, the USA. And Eva is based north of Boston, Massachusetts, and loves everything outdoors. And so do I. So that's a good connection between the two of us. So welcome today, Eva.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good.
It's
So
my pleasure.
Sorry, go ahead.
It is my pleasure.
Yes, I'm excited to talk with you today.
Ditto.
So you believe that tourism is a force for good, and not all people may see tourism this way. How would you convince those people otherwise?
Well, I think for one, just on a simple economical level, tourism is the livelihood of 1 in 10 or 11 people worldwide. So without tourism, an estimated 109 million people, which is the equivalent of the population of South Korea and Italy together, would be without work. And just if we think a little bit about the impact that would have worldwide, it's a pretty strong case for keeping tourism in a sustainable tourism, I should add, alive and well. And on a more pragmatic and philosophical level, I also believe that travel is imperative to reducing the prevalence of prejudice, racism, sexism, fear, conflicts that are all rooted in all these isms. And I think also, as the pandemic has proven to many of us, travel doesn't have to include a long flight to a foreign country. Someone visiting another town in their own country or state, or even just spending a day in their own town, is still bringing that, positive impact of a tourist, meaning dollars.
Yes, exactly.
So, and also just the exchange that you engage in. When I've spent quite a bit of time just trying to promote tourism here in my little town of Marblehead, and it's amazing just in speaking to vendors and business owners, just the reaction to this. They're like, well, where have you been? Like, what do you mean we're gonna bring in like good tourists? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, where have you been all this time? So I really do think there is room in some, not all locations, because of course some locations do have, they're leaning towards the tendencies of over tourism already. I mean, I have a good example just across the way here in Salem, Massachusetts. They have over tourism clearly during some parts of the year, namely October and Halloween.
Yes, exactly.
And I said, we can help with that. We'll take some of them. So just dispersing, the impact.
Yes, yeah, and I think you hit on a good point. The pandemic has been a good time for people to explore their own countries. And I know that's something that we did last summer, was we went on many trails and hikes, because I'm close to the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So we went on a lot of hikes in the mountains that we had never heard of before. Just ask on Facebook, what's your favorite trail to go hiking on? And explored some beautiful areas. So it certainly was a chance for people to get out in their own countries.
Yeah, and it's amazing too, I think, that, we travel with a sense of awe and wonder when we go someplace else, but yet when we go out and about in our own community, for some reason, most of us don't have that sense of awe and wonder, where you stop and look at a different building in a different way, or you actually take the time to walk into a church and look at the paintings and the ornamental, the detailed carvings and stuff. We just don't.
No, you're right. And especially, what you all mentioned about the benefits of tourism, the economy, and that's something that concerns me greatly. And I know I've heard from a lot of people that, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but once in a while they'll go, all travel is selfish right now. And I respectfully disagree with that, because there are countries and towns out there that are being absolutely crushed economically due to this pandemic. And I have great concern for those.
Yeah, even wildlife preservation, relies a lot on the tourism dollar also.
Mhm.
Rightly or wrongly, I think we can argue that point also. But the
Mhm.
fact is that many of them do rely on tourism as, to fund their projects. And if there is no tourism, then there's no funding, and then we just pave the way for the poachers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've been reading about that as well. Yeah. Yeah, and the cultural and the biases that we have, that's a huge one, going to different countries and experiencing things rather than just believing everything you read. Go and actually see and learn from them. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a key one for sure.
And key to all of it, of course, is to maintain an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I will also just argue that it's not just for travel. Living here now for a long, long, long time, I've seen it feels like we become more and more siloed.
Yes.
And that goes for the tourism industry. It goes for most industries as well. But I feel like it's rare to be able to engage in just conversations where people disagree, where you all sit around a table and you discuss a topic of a conversation. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to take that opportunity to feel a bit more enlightened, even though you don't necessarily agree. That's okay. But at least broaden that vision and sense of maybe why somebody sees this issue as blue and I see it as green, or you know what I mean? Just to see different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's something that I think we have lost.
Yeah.
And it's very important to get back to those conversations and those discussions.
And curiosity.
Yeah.
Why is it that you feel that way, or why is it that this is, the way it is? It's just that, again, sense of awe and wonder. It's like a child who picks something up and it's like, oh, what is this?
Yeah,
If I look
exactly.
at it this way, it looks differently, and if I look at it this way, it's different.
Well, and we like to seem to tell people that you should live the way that I think that you should live,
Very much so.
without experiencing their country and experiencing their culture and understanding why they do what they do.
Yeah, but that's nothing new. We've been doing that since the day of the Vikings.
Yes. Conquer everybody and you live my way. Yes.
The religion, you name it. We've been doing that forever. Not right, but that is definitely a human tendency to try to convince others to live like they do.
Yes, that's true. So, Eva, what are some projects that you have worked on to move the needle on sustainable tourism?
Well, I started early, as you mentioned. I volunteered at the first ever tourism or summit, whatever they called it, of ecotourism at the Yale Forestry School in '96, I think it was. And then, that was also when I studied tourism and travel as my undergraduate degree. And then it was a 3-day event where I came face to face with the sustainable side of tourism, I think, for the first time, having sort of lived it and studied it beforehand. So I think that's really when the light bulb went off. I'm like, this is really the path I want to devote my professional career to. And then since then, I've been an advocate for sustainable tourism. I've been an ambassador for TIES, the International Ecotourism Society. Written articles for various platforms and blogs focused on a more environmentally sound way of life. I became involved, must have been in 2018 or so, in a project with the aim is to elevate equestrian tourism in Chile and LATAM. That's an ongoing project that I was supposed to have gone to Chile actually this past January, which for obvious reasons did not happen. But just bringing the community on board and diversifying the way that it's a cross project with preserving the Chilean native breed of horse. So instead of it being just used for rodeos, which is sort of the predominant use now, it would also be used for tourism, and it ties in all kinds of different community-based aspects and creating an ecosystem essentially around that. And then in September of last year, I became a founding member of RISE Travel Institute with a mission to inspire responsible, ethical, sustainable, and impactful travel through education. We have a course coming up in June. an online 10-week course. And then next week, I will start my new job with the ATTA, Adventure Travel Trade Association, which is, the biggest member-based trade organization working to elevate the standard of tourism around the world.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very, very, very excited.
Yeah, I can imagine. I love adventure travel. So yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah, and adventure travel is interesting because a lot of people think of it as, hang gliding or, throwing yourself off a cliff. It really only, according to the ATTA, their definition, it's just, 2 out of 3 components need to touch. And it is community, activity, and nature. So as long as 2 of 3 of those components connect, then that's sort of defined as adventure tourism. And it can be soft adventure, it could be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but it can also just be a leisurely bike ride on, a nice canal or a rail bed.
Yes. Yeah, like you said, it's not just jumping out of a plane or anything like that. So no. Cool. So you've been in the tourism industry for 20 plus years. So over this time, you must have seen astronomical changes. Now, how can we take this current situation we are in and address what we have seen in the past as negative and make those changes?
You mean with COVID, the impact that COVID had with, just halting travel?
Yes, and making us really think.
Yeah.
And stop and think about how we travel in the future and what changes need to be made to address certain problems. So
yeah, I definitely think it's a time of opportunity. Every challenge is also opportunity. And I do feel that the conversation has gained a lot of momentum. I'm also very aware that, we tune into the channels that we want to hear the news of. So if I want to listen to something that's, good about tourism, then I'm going to turn into this channel and I'm going to follow these people. Whereas I don't really know, I'll fully admit that I don't really know what's going on, in the community of pro cruise people. What is the conversation they are having? Are they having the same conversation, or are they just eager to get on the next cruise ship?
Right.
I don't know. But I think it's really important that we recognize that the industry is a little bit siloed. It's not, if not quite a lot. There was a study, I think it was booking.com, who did a study on sustainable tourism, and an overwhelming number of respondents said they wanted to book sustainable travel, but also a shockingly large number did not know how to go about it.
Yeah.
So there's a massive gap, and that also, it worries me quite a bit, because if you want to do something but you don't know how to, if somebody then presents you with something and says, oh, this is what you're looking for, you're likely to sort of believe them and say, oh, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And it could be a whole other era of greenwashing, which we all hope we won't enter. So I think education is definitely key, and working together as a strong community. I also don't necessarily think, we've seen a lot of different sort of subcategories of sustainable tourism pop up. Regenerative, there's a whole slew of them, and everyone's doing great work. But I do think that it confuses the consumer. I know that sustainable tourism has been a term that, people say, oh, it's overused, it's not defined enough. I see it as an umbrella term, and then we have all these, nature-based tourism, ecotourism, tourism, all those other kinds of tourisms underneath. And I do ultimately think that all this fragmentation is somewhat confusing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. And you mentioned also with the different styles of tour, like I'm not a cruiser either. It's just not something that really interests me, but I know that people who are cruisers, they're very dedicated to that industry. And, a part of this show as well, I'm interviewing different people. I have the type of tourism that I love, which, I love community tourism. I love adventure travel. I love immersing myself in the destination. but I also am interviewing a couple people that are in the cruise industry to get their perspective. So keeping an open mind on what those people love about it and why.
Yeah, I think it's really important to bring everybody together in the same room.
Yeah.
I think one thing that could help is also to have like a global sustainability index of sorts, just like we have for buildings. We have a LEED certification for buildings. Why is it that we don't yet have a worldwide standardized measure against which we can measure, you know, the various components of the tourism industry?
Yeah, I agree. Interesting. Well, maybe we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, GSTP, just for one, you know, they're doing a great job of certifying, but I also, and they're broadening, they're creating different kinds of certifications also, and there are a couple of bodies, organizations that do this work, and it's good, but I think ultimately what we need is something that's standardized globally. And I also think, you know, educating, having a program for consumers is really, really important, which is why I'm involved with Rise Travel Institute.
Yeah.
I spent time in international education, and I just saw this massive gap between the time that the students signed on to do this study abroad experience. And then, you know, I also had the opportunity and the pleasure of leading a number of these tours, primarily the shorter tours overseas. And I saw all these sort of mistakes, and we've all made them, that I think so many of them can be eliminated, or at least if the piece of education is in the person's head, they can go like, "Ooh, that's right." They can recognize the mistake instead of just being blatantly ignorant.
Yes, and with the education and the consumer confusion, something else, some people may not even know what community tourism is, because to me, a lot of people that's more of that's a newer term, I think. And they're, well, what is that? And I say, you know, it's near and dear to my heart. And I know you wrote an article about how host communities are at the core of tomorrow's sustainable tourism. So do you want to expand on what your vision of host communities and that aspect could be, and, you know, explain what community tourism is to people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, community-based tourism is, I mean, communities are at the base of, I would say, all tourism. But the concept of community-based tourism is really, it's a type of tourism that benefits the community, and but it's also not reliant on tourism. As I mentioned in the article that I wrote, it was on Good Tourism blog, if you want to look it up. And it highlights the fact that it is a community that's not dependent on tourism. So that this year, for example, the community that was highlighted in that article in Thailand, they were actually fine, relatively speaking, when the pandemic hit, because they had a system within the community to sustain themselves. And, you know, it's all about creating that ecosystem. And even just, you know, as we said before, people who, you know, it's all about, ultimately, obviously, it's about one of the pieces is, of course, about funding. And I think it's important to remember, as we touched upon earlier on, that even if you just go out your front door, I live in a beautiful little community, and just by me walking out the door, shopping local, staying local, patronizing the local restaurants or getting takeout if they're closed, just supporting the local town. It's basically the community supporting itself. So instead of, I know a lot of residents here, they go and shop at, you know, Marshalls and Walmart and some of these other big corporate stores, instead of going downtown and spending their money locally, so that they can provide employment for the local population and sustaining it that way. Buying your, you know, I live on the coast, so buy your fish locally. Don't go to the supermarket and buy it off the dock.
Where it tastes better.
And that too.
Yeah, it tastes better. So for the communities that are more reliant on tourism, do you think that travelers can help them build that ecosystem to make them more self-reliant on their own communities rather than just on tourism, because there are some communities that tourism is their sole income.
Yeah, and I think two things I'd like to touch on. I think it's important to diversify the economy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should never lay all of your eggs in one basket. And the other piece of that, I think that the local government can really play a large role in that, where there is still, and I know this for a fact, there is still opportunity locally and globally for local governance to realize that there is massive potential in sustainable tourism in the communities. Like, we are in this little town, I would dare say that by definition, we are a community in decline. We have prime real estate, you know, shop windows that are being replaced with dentists and architects who are usually, you know, up in the back of a building somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the turnover of these retail stores it's too high. So we as a community are not doing enough to support our own community. So that's really just an example of, you know, how community tourism, we are ripe for an opportunity of doing that. And then, as I mentioned, also we have Salem right next door. It's just a matter of, you know, collaborating with Salem, and I know they're open to this, and, you know, creating sort of a co-branded little excursion. And all it takes is just to reach across the table and say, hey, you know, can we work together on this? It would help us both.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about your community, because I used to live in a community, my family did, that was it's a lakeside community. So, you know, in the summer, 30,000 people would flock there, be on the beach, and then in the winter they would all disappear. And the same thing, you know, the downtown, the turnover of restaurants. I've never seen such a high turnover of restaurants in a community in my life as was in that community, and the stores closing downtown, and the exact same thing happening. Yeah. So now, we had said earlier too, or you'd mentioned that 70% of people want to travel sustainably, but they have no idea how. So how would you tell people to make those sustainable, or show them how to make those sustainable travel choices?
I think the biggest challenge is to get in front of mainstream right now. You know, those of us who already are tuned into the station of sustainable travel, you know, it's all at our fingertips. We kind of, you know, we know where to go, but those 70% of the people who don't know, they don't even know where to go. So, you know, the marketing and promotion doesn't sound right, but it's basically a public announcement. Just to make them to have a way to make them aware that this is an opportunity. Or also, just again, it comes right down to education. Do those people who do not travel sustainably, are they aware of the impact that they're having? Are they aware of the fact that if they continue this, and generations, you know, their younger generations who, you know, typically we follow in our parents' footsteps, right? You know, there's tradition there. And so if you grow up in a family that takes, you know, non-sustainable vacations, you're probably pretty likely, I would say, to do that again. Although I know there's a shift now with the younger generation, thank God. And so I think, again, just the education. And I think also a big part of this is also the trade. Travel advisors, many of them, they don't know what sustainable tourism is either, because again, it comes back to the dollar. If you are a travel agent and you get a commission on, you know, let's say arbitrarily, you get a 30% commission on excursion A, and you get a 15% commission on excursion B, you're going to probably steer people towards A. So leveling that difference out also, and realizing, or making them understand that there is a difference beyond just the commission. That long-term option A is not going to be sustainable, and also it's not going to be enjoyable for all of the people who are being sent to excursion A. And that it's worthwhile. It's not just all about money. It is about the experience.
Yes. Yeah. getting back into the destination rather than how many, what the thread count is on the sheets type of thing.
Correct, but also just, we've all stood in a long queue to see some spectacle or other.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not particularly enjoyable. You go to the beach and it's all just full. It's chock-a-block.
Yeah.
Some of us have had the fortune of having really serene and beautiful moments without crowds.
Mm-hmm.
And, the experience for the person, unless, again, you have a bucket list and a camera and you just need to Instagram it, that's a different type of traveler. But I think that's really, that is part of the segment that needs to be educated
Mm-hmm.
and realize that slowing down provides them with a much richer experience that
Mm-hmm.
for a lifetime.
And I think the people that love to travel, I think this has really opened their eyes as well. And, I've been watching, as many people have, lots of discussions between experts in the industry and that type of thing. And they're saying that right now, people are so open-minded and just asking questions. What do we need to do? How can we change things? What can we do to travel better? So those discussions are happening. So that is promising to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. So thank you today, Eva, for all your time. And if people want to find out more about you, where's the best place to find you? Now, I know things are changing with you. You're starting a new job, but where's the best place to find out more?
I will always be on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Eva Mossberg. You can also find me for Rise Travel Institute at eva@risetravelinstitute.org. And of course, Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, everybody's everywhere.
You're right.
Well, congratulations on your new position, and I wish you all the best. And we'll just all keep having these discussions and see the changes that we hope.
It's much appreciated. Thank you for bringing it to light.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day, Eva.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.